All right, everybody should be able to pretty much hear me clearly. Hopefully, everybody's feeling well this afternoon. We're about to go ahead and get this party started. This will be a brief session. I just want to kind of give an overview of what's getting ready to take place and happen next. So let me run down through a couple things and share my screen. Screen share is enabled. All right. So as pretty sure everyone can see today, visual heat map this thing real quick. You see, obviously, your biggest losers today, NVIDIA, Microsoft, AVGO. You see some of your winners, though, where the rotation went into. You had Walmart, which went up, XOM. Caterpillar had a decent start to the day. Let's see how Cat's finishing, right? Cat's up still 12, so $700 a share, Caterpillar. So rotation into some of those names is what you saw. But let's get into the good stuff, the nitty gritty. First thing I want to talk about is actually I was looking at the S&P 500, but I want to start off on BTC, Bitcoin, which is back at about 76K. And I want to talk about Coinbase. So the next 48 to 72 hours, next three trading sessions, because you got Wednesday, Thursday, Friday left for the week. So you want to watch, just to give you guys some key insight and levels to pay attention to. You want to watch this 161 level. So I want you to put that down, right, for Coinbase, right? Coinbase 161. I want you to look at that area and those levels there. Bitcoin obviously is approaching points that hasn't been to in a while. So you also have Bitcoin, which is still breaking the bottom. It broke out of this bear flag, but now it has formed another bear flag here, as you can see on a 4 hour time frame. So a break underneath 74,000, a break and a close below. So I think that we're going to see ETH as well. I know ETH has been coming down. ETH I saw that like $28 today. So we're getting close to the levels, particularly on Ethereum, like another $600, and it really becomes attractive. And then you look at BTC, we can draw all the way down on Bitcoin, roughly to about this 58 to 66,000 range. A lot of questions on the back end pertaining to where should you set some limit orders? Should you be buying here? Right, is one of the questions that was asked of me. I'll say, like, in the grand scheme of things, when Bitcoin goes to 200,000, whether you got it at 76 or 66, I'm not going to say that it doesn't matter, but you want to try to accumulate as much as you possibly can. We may not get 50. Am I confident that we're going to get into this 66 and 58 range? I'm pretty confident. But I do think that if you have, once again, the risk tolerance, it is worth you actually looking to maybe start picking, putting some orders in, already having some buy orders to pick up BTC if this is your name that you're looking to go ahead and acquire. Now, with that being said, if we are anticipating that MicroStrategy, of course, as well too, ticker MSTR, some good questions here. Currently back at about $133. If you look here on an hour time frame, after we made a lower low, we now are making a what? A lower high. Right? So price obviously had a major move here during this session. So that lower high is actually happening now. And so it could be very possible that we do end up seeing, right, MicroStrategy breaking to the downside again and flushing underneath 126. So you want to look at that. After that, the levels that remain left in the $100 area, really there's only three: 117, 113, and 101. So there's not really much support that's going to be holding MicroStrategy up between 75 and $93. That's where specifically you want to actually look to go ahead and pick up MSTR. Right. So MicroStrategy, if you look here, you want to get this thing sub $80, right? Essentially, that's going to be so down here in these areas is where you want to get MSTR. Right, so sub $80 a share is where you want to pick up MST. You got that there. Now, you may have noticed names like CrowdStrike came down during this session, as well as Oracle. We're going to cover AMD. I know AMD has earnings after hours. I will not be taking a position on AMD post hours. So you got Oracle as well, which came down here to this 151 level. So that was your next TP. So by show of comments in the chat, right? How many people, to be clear, correct, average down at 20 to 30 cents, which is $2 to $3. So you're still distance away from there. So 20 to 30 cents was originally would have been, let's say MSTU had never split, that would be equivalent to $2 to $3 now. All right. So just refrain because we do anticipate MSTR to go lower. Oracle, let's talk about it. So Oracle, here, CrowdStrike, obviously two names that have came to the downside. What should you be looking to do next, right? Here on both of these names. You should specifically be expecting, right, Oracle to start looking to potentially move downward a bit more, but only once we get below this 151. So we made a lower low. What's next is for us to actually go ahead and make a lower high, right? So it's likely that we push upward first before continuing movement to the upside, to the downside, right? It's likely that we push upward before continuing that move downward. So I want to make that note on Oracle. Now, CrowdStrike. We've talked about Crowd numerous of weeks saying, hey, from a long-term investor perspective, I told this story many of times. I'm going to tell it again, right? Usually when CrowdStrike falls, 20 to 30%, that ends up being a really good spot long-term investing wise. Now, in a perfect world, we would love this thing to come back down to the lower 300s, like 337, like down there. That would be like in a perfect world. Sometimes, perfect world doesn't always exist, right? So what area particularly am I looking for us to actually go get this name, right? Because we're getting close. Earnings are still about a month away. So you still have earnings, which is coming up, which this is probably going to be one of their biggest earnings reports to kick us off for the year of 2026 because of all the years previously that they forecasted that 2026 would be their turning point. But they forecasted to us that this would be the year that they end up generating a ton of profit and that they end up turning, things around for themselves from a profit-making perspective. So we are still waiting on that, specifically here on CrowdStrike. So the spot that I want you to, put down on your notes in between that essentially 325 to 375, you got a $50 window that you want to try to acquire as much CrowdStrike that you can. So it's already drew down here from 566. So we're expecting, like I said, more of a move here on the downside. And then, of course, with Oracle, you're looking at 100 to 120 bucks. You already know that. We've covered that extensively there. All right. Let's talk about CRM, which is making another 52-week low. It'll close underneath 200 for the first time in a while here. So CRM, look here, no further on Salesforce, underneath 187. You have some areas where this thing, I personally believe that Salesforce is going to come down all the way roughly to, I would say, I think it's going to come down to 130 bucks. I'm very bearish on Salesforce as well as Adobe. Let me actually pull up Adobe on this other side real quick. I did a little coverage of Adobe earlier, but let me reiterate some things. So you remember there was a couple, I forgot who it was. It was a couple people. It was actually just wasn't one person. But some people asked me, it was like, yo, what do you think about investing in Adobe? And you remember my answer on that Zoom, right? If you were on that Zoom, you remember my answer. And I said, hey, I could make a bear case on Adobe here on the monthly. Want to show this, right? So this is your macro level time frame, right? So now you have Adobe, which is sitting here about to break underneath 270 and go down to 257. Ideally, I could also position myself to say Adobe in between 180 to 220. That'd be the price to pay. Now, let's talk about it from a fundamental perspective. This is now a company with a 16 P to E, but they almost have a $17 they're earning each year. So the price is getting almost right, but it is right at these levels, but the selling pressure in this industry, as you see, is turning up. If I would have told you at 600-700 that I could give you an opportunity to get Adobe at 180 to 220, you would take it. If I told you at CRM at 300-350 that I could maybe give you a shot to get it at 120 to 150, you would take it with no question, right? So these are the spots that you want to pick up these names. I expect the selling to get more violent in this space, particularly on Microsoft, Snowflake, some of the names that we covered before. I expect that the selling drops these names further, which opens up you a great long-term buying opportunity. Now, I want to specifically speak about Adobe real quick and show you this is the lowest level that Adobe's been to since 2022, right? And let me actually go solo screen on it real quick. So this is a macro level. This is nothing micro. So as Adobe is breaking these levels, you remember I said, hey, I would touch on Adobe as we started to break down. So just like when Oracle was breaking, so as Adobe puts could really print all the way to about 257. So if you are looking for a trade, right, put some time on it, go out to probably April, May, maybe even a little further if you so choose, if you got the bag size for it. But I'm telling you here now, right, we are going to see this name come here downward, right, a little bit further. So, continue to keep your eyes peeled on Adobe breaking down another 15 and then fall it even further from there. So add Adobe on your watch list. We'll talk about it on a watch list the next couple of weeks. But I wanted to show this here on a chart. We have breaking pretty much a 4-year low going back to October of 2022. So almost been 4 years since we last got down to these levels. All right. So are we clear on Adobe? Is everybody good with Adobe? Go out 2 to 3 months plus. Make sure you go in the money, probably a 280, 300 put. Lock in. You got your target of 257 and lower. All right. You got that on Adobe there. Let's talk about AMD best and worst case scenario. So AMD market is closed now. So we're here. They'll be reporting here any second. So you get an opportunity to hear from AM Dizzle. But let's say they do what essentially Palantir did, right? They gapped up after hours. Let's say, you have that movement. Well, I'm sure we'll be hearing from them. We just got EA. Earnings just came out. Let's see. The company, yeah, EA just came out with their earnings. So let's say AMD comes here to the upside, which I think is probably slim, right? A very, very slim chance of us actually coming to the upside. Now, when I do look at AMD, I would like to see two things actually take place here. I would definitely love to see a pullback. Now, on any bearish tip, right, underneath this essentially 235, 234 area, I think you're going to see more selling that'll lead us down into the 272 zone. So those are my thoughts, particularly there at this time on AMD. So just keep this on your watch list. Tomorrow we'll probably cover it a bit more. Let's talk about Palantir since I spoke on PLTR, which is pretty much in the same spot right now that we started shorting the name here today, right around this 157 mark. So they're in the same spot and essentially move really since this morning. We are going to continue to hold these puts. So I'll keep you updated if anything essentially changes, right, on particularly this name. But we want to see a break underneath, right? Particularly here, if we can get a break underneath 148 and draw down below 144 again. That's what we'll be taking a look at. Next, I want to talk Tesla. Closed today at 421. So as you see, it got down to 414. But that 414 level is definitely a lot of buyers step in around 414, continuing on TSLA. So until you actually break underneath 414, think that you'll continue to see those bounces, but you are making lower lows and lower highs. So we can get underneath that. I would like for Tesla to start taking a move towards 394. So just wanted to make that note on Tesla underneath 408. Look for that. Now, Microsoft, some people are going to ask, where is Microsoft going next? You may have seen my notes that have came in, right? So my notes actually here right now underneath 408 have FT, excuse me, them actually going down right to about 398. Right, so 398 underneath that 408, they're going to take a move down to 398. Just my thoughts on that. Last but not least, let's get Netflix, but I also don't only want to cover Netflix. Shout out to everybody who's in this trade with me currently. I want to cover NFLU. So this is Netflix's 2x levered ETF. This is NFLU, right? So you guys should see that plain as day here. NFLU, which is at $23 and change. 12 to 15. I want you to put that in the chat for me. So there's no questions on it when it happens. 12 to 15. Post these notes as well that are being taken. $12 to $15. That is the price zone that you want to pick up NFLU. So we still got another 50% that we need. So what does that mean? We need Netflix to drop 25%. And that would relatively put us within that 55 to 65 range. And so that's we're here at 79, finally broke underneath 80. Let these puts cook up. I think we're going to easily get down to a couple of these targets at 77 and $74. So let this cook up. Be patient with me. Allow it to actually work, right, in your favor, right? So just be patient with me for a few. Let Netflix actually work in your favor, and I'll come here to this downside. So those are my thoughts on NFLX. Now, NFLU, once again, this is a 2x levered ETF. But you want to pick up Netflix in between $55 to $65. Once again, $55 to $65. So notice a lot of the stocks that we've been highlighting are now giving us the opportunities that we want, right? If we can get us to come right down here in these zones, perfect. Once again, if I told you at 130, 130 bucks, I could give you a chance to get Netflix at $60. You would take it all day, no question, right? No question about it. You would take the deal. You wouldn't even question me about it. You'd be like, all right, where I sign up, LE, right? So now you got NFLU, which you can actually pick up at $12 to $15. So this thing is going to make some all-time lows. Let it do that. But 12 to 15 is going to be the area that you want to pick this thing up. So if it gets to 15, don't jump in right away. See if it can go down, maybe even to 10, right? If we get 10, shoot, we'll take it. And that just means Netflix broke underneath $50, right? So we'll take it, and boom. So those are my thoughts. Targets-wise, make sure you guys are staying abreast of the position updates channel. All the information will stay right here for you. So you'll have that information there. If you missed any of these classes, you can come right here. Like, for example, you came in, you might have missed a little bit of this one. Come right here, click that recording, and then pull right up for you. So that's what we have going on here at this time. Let's look at AMD. Still no move quite yet. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, Netflix, we're still locked in on that. Let's let that hit 77. You can start to peel out of there a little bit at 77. Palantir, stay in on that as well. So Netflix and Palantir, stay in on both of those positions, guys. Right. Talk to you guys soon. And I'll make sure that I'll drop those notes and this recording. Yep. Got you. And yep, we did cover Coinbase as well. And as well, we did cover CR.